teachers so that we can, make sure that we're meeting you where you're at. And, if you're like me, there are times when you like to learn things asynchronously, and there are times when you like to just have somebody there that you can ask questions and kind of bounce ideas off of and stuff like that. So this is kind of one of those. But what I want to do today is kind of give you an overview of Zoom and how we can really leverage Zoom to make an engaging and effective classroom for our students as we teach them remotely. So there will be other people that are coming into the Zoom over time. I'll let them in, but right now we're recording what I'm saying, and that way that will be available to you if you ever want to refer back to it or anything like that. So let me start off with an overview just to kind of give you an idea of the format. And then we'll do a little Q&A at the end to answer any questions you have, or start talking about some of the specific problems that you might be having and things like that. So let me share my screen. And as you may know, screen sharing is one of the many advantages to using Zoom. And one of the things you can share is a Google slideshow. So I have one prepared for you with some of the things that we're going to go through today. So this is Zoom for Teachers. So what I want to talk about to start off with today is some of the key settings and how you schedule meetings in Zoom. All right, and we've actually over the last 6 weeks or so, we've learned a lot about Zoom. We kind of went into this not knowing too much about it, and we're getting to be experts on some of the ins and outs and some of the things that work and some of the things that don't work. All right, so I want to share with you a couple of the best practices that we use when we're creating links and setting up some of those settings. So to begin, let's talk about how you actually schedule a meeting. There are a couple ways that you can do it. One is by creating a link in Zoom and copying the link, and then going into your Schoology page and putting the link into the Schoology page. All right, so that's one way to do it. And that we've had some problems with that. So I don't actually even want to show you that way. I want to show you the way that seems to have worked the best for people so far, okay? And that is in Zoom, or rather in Schoology, that method involves going into your Schoology course page and clicking on add materials, or clicking on the dotted line here if I wanted to add it up here at the top, okay? And you can get to this menu by clicking add materials or that dotted line. And in order to create my meeting link, I want to choose add file link external tool, okay? Again, this is the preferred way. This is the way that we've found works the most reliably when it comes to students logging in and things like that, okay? Now, I want to point out a couple of things about my Schoology course, because as you know, Zoom and Schoology are kind of tied. They're really the two platforms that we're using to teach kids during this time. And I want you to notice that I actually have 6 different sections of my course, and they're all linked together. All right, so if you have different sections, you know that sometimes you have the option to link those sections together so they kind of all appear in one place. So that's going to cause me to see things a certain way, and I'll point out when those are. And just so you know, if your sections are not linked, you may not see some of these things. Okay, so here I am. I've clicked on the dotted line, and I'm ready to. I'm going to add file, link, and external tool. All right, and that's going to bring up this menu, which allows me to choose a file, a link, or an external tool. And there just happens to be a tool that is embedded into Schoology that allows us to create a Zoom link. So I want to click on external tool. All right. Now, under tool provider, I'm going to choose from the drop-down menu, Zoom. And I want to give it a title. And in this case, because I'm going to use this tool to be the place where any student in any one of my sections views the link, I'm going to call this Zoom link. Okay, just generic, so they know that's how you get to the Zoom. Okay. Now, notice I'm not going to do anything else in this screen. I'm just going to select the tool. I'm going to put in the title, and I'm going to come down here and click submit. All right. That now sets up a tool that I can configure for each one of my sections. All right. So if I come here to Zoom Link, you'll notice when I open it up, I have kind of like a Zoom window embedded in this spot. And I just realized that I have something I've already created while I was demonstrating this for somebody else. So when you come in here, you'll see no meetings, right? And you'll see a few tabs. You have upcoming meetings, previous meetings, personal meeting room, and cloud recordings. Okay, so we want to stay here, just the first tab. Okay, now, in order to make things easy for yourself and for your students, I recommend having the fewest number of links that you can possibly have. And in this case, for this section, I want to have just one link, and that's the link that every time the kids know that they're supposed to be in a Zoom, they're going to come here, they're going to click on the link, and they're going to be in the Zoom. Okay, and here's how I'll do it. I'm going to click up here and click schedule a new meeting. But if you remember, I said before that my sections are linked. Okay, and so I have a drop down up here, which you notice says first hour. That's the name of my first section. Okay, excuse me. So I have first hour, and when I click there, I see my other classes, my other linked sections. All right, so what I want to do is I want to create a link just for first hour here. So I'll click schedule a new meeting, and I'm going to rename this link because it's going to have all of my sections listed here. I'm just going to call this Mr. Harrison's class first hour. And let's say, I'm going to put in the rest of the information that they need for my class. So I'm going to say first hour, 8:15 on A days, and I'm putting that all in the topic because I want to just have one link for these guys. All right. Now, as we scroll down, there are many settings that you can change, but the one I really want to go to is, in order to make this a single meeting link, is I want to choose a recurring meeting. And because I have all this A day and B day and times, afternoons and mornings and things like that going on, and a schedule that changes on about a 3-week basis, what I want to do is make this recurrence not daily at a specific time, but I want to make this at no fixed time. Okay, I can always come in here and I can change the title and stuff like that if I want to, or if I just want to say first hour, I'm good there too. Okay, but what this is going to do is it's going to create a meeting link for any time this class needs to meet on Zoom. All right, and it doesn't matter when it is. They can follow the schedule that comes out from the school or whatever it is, but they click the link and they get in. All right. Now, some important settings. This is where we're going to get into really what we want to talk about today is how do we make our Zoom meeting settings what they should be to avoid, student misbehavior, confusion about logging in, and things like that. And one of those is to make sure that you have the check in the box that says waiting room. And the reason for that is we want to know who's coming into our Zoom rooms. We want to be able to visually look at the name and go, all right, that's a person that belongs in my third hour, so he's not supposed to be here. Or that's not a name I recognize. Or that's a student in my first hour. I'm going to let him or her in. Okay? So we're visually, inspecting the names and the logins of each student that tries to enter our room. Okay? Now, by default, the video for the host and participant are on. You can choose to turn those on or off. You obviously are the host. If you want to have your students' cameras off when they come in, that's fine. They still have the option. You can't force them to turn their camera on. Not only, technically, and you can't also, it's not appropriate to even make them do that. So you can request that, but they're not necessarily going to have their cameras on anyway. But if you set it to off, then they will not have their cameras on by default when they come into the room. Okay. For audio, probably want to leave it at computer audio. These people or these students are probably going to be using their computers to, and not an external device or not a phone to join the audio. So leave it at that. And then you get to some of the other meeting options. I like to have the box checked that says mute participants upon entry. So that kind of keeps the noise level down at first. And again, students can unmute themselves if you allow for that. And I'll show you how to not allow for that later on. You know, but they're off to begin with. The other one I highly recommend that you check is the one that says only authenticated users can join. All right, that's really important because if you don't check that box, it is possible for someone who's not part of our district, who has nothing to do with our school district and the education of kids, to be able to get into our Zoom rooms, and we don't want that, okay? That's like leaving your, you know, it's like leaving the doors to the school unlocked, okay? We want to check that box, and we want students to sign in with their Dearborn Schools accounts, all right? And then we come down here and we hit save, and we'll notice when we go back to our course meetings that we now have a recurring meeting, and it's called Mr. Harrison's class first hour, 8:15 on A days, and we're good to go, okay? This is the link that my first hour is going to come to every single time. I never have to change it. I never have to change the dates and the times because I set it as a recurring meeting that has no fixed time. So the kids will know, most likely outside of your classroom, what hour they're supposed to be in. They know to come to your class, they can click there, and they can join the meeting, okay? You, as the teacher, can come here and you can click start, and the meeting begins, okay? Now, that's how you create, that's kind of the basics of how you create a meeting with the external link. But if you remember, my classes, my sections are linked together. So if you're in that situation, what you'll notice is that if you go up here and you click a different class, there is no meeting for that class because we just created the link only for first hour because first hour was what was selected up here, okay? So what I am personally gonna do, because I wanna have a different link for every one of my sections, I don't want, for instance, my first hour students to be able to click on the link for sixth hour. They don't belong there, they don't need to come there. They have no business being there. And if we don't give them the link, it's less likely that they're going to find their way to my classroom at that time. Okay. So I'm going to create a separate link for each one of these guys. So I'll go through just real quickly again, make this sixth hour. If they're in sixth hour, they know what to do. They come in here, they click on it, making it a recurring meeting that meets at no fixed time. Got to check that box that says only authenticated users can join, and I'll save my meeting, okay? And once again, now when I click on my Zoom link, I can toggle between my first hour class, my second hour, my third hour. If I've created the links there, I can come to sixth hour, and all I see is my sixth hour link, okay? So if it's a student in my sixth hour, they will only see the link to sixth hour. Okay, so that's kind of the basics of how you set up a Zoom meeting in your Schoology class. Okay, now let's get into a little bit more of the settings that we recommend. I did mention a couple of them already, including making sure it's an authenticated user and things like that. But for the most part, most of these settings are going to be set originally in your Zoom account. So let me take you to where you do that. And that's going to bring up a very important point that that we need to impress upon students as we have them using our Zoom links, okay? Many students are having difficulty joining the Zoom link, and part of the reason for that is they're not first going to this site, which is the Dearborn Schools website for Zoom, and signing in here. All right, so if you have any students having difficulties joining your Zoom, the thing that you need to recommend is that they go to the dearbornschools.org website and click on the link for Zoom, and then come here and click sign in. okay? Now, once they do that in another tab, they can usually, 95% of the time, they can get into your Zoom link by clicking it in another tab, okay? But very important that they come here first. And a lot of students, if they just come to that once, you know, before their first class, before they close their Chromebook, and every time they open their Chromebook after that, if they just go to dearbornschools-org.zoom.us, or again, let me just take you to the Dearborn Schools website. You'll find the same link on the Dearborn Schools site under the student portal. It's here somewhere. Oh, I'm not on the student portal. Hang on one second. It reloaded after I changed it. Okay. It's this link right here on the student portal that they click on in order to get to that site, dearbornschools-org.zoom.us. And again, they just sign in. Okay. The other issue with logging in, now that we're talking about settings, is actually a Google issue. Because students have accounts through Google, they're authenticated, they're really verified in their identity through Google, all right? And there are actually a couple confusing ways about the way Google works. So let me show you a little bit about that. If students are having trouble getting in, a lot of times they may not be signed in with only their Dearborn Schools account. All right, this can happen for a lot of reasons. They might be using the Chromebook that their older brother or sister was using earlier in the day, or their little brother did his homework just an hour before they logged into their Zoom. And so even though they see their profile up here, when they click on it, they actually have another account logged in, okay? And that can cause problems for signing into Zoom and Schoology. All right, so what we recommend is if they're having difficulties getting in, that they they go to Google, and this is the same as, you know, Google Calendar or Gmail or something like that. And if they click there and they see someone else's name other than theirs, or someone else's account other than theirs, or if they see their school account and their personal account, which is another instance where this happens, then they want to sign out and then sign back in with only their Dearborn Schools account. Okay, so that's one of the issues. Another even more complicating factor to all this is there are actually two places that you can sign into Google. One is within the website itself. The other one is in the browser. And you'll notice when I click up here, many of you will notice that your picture is up there. I don't have my picture on file here. I just have the Dearborn Schools logo. But you'll notice that I have other accounts that are signed into this browser. So you can sign into the website and you can sign into the browser with Google. And either one of these, if either one of these has someone else signed in, that can cause problems for getting into Zoom and getting into Schoology. All right, so know that, and that could be something that you use to help troubleshoot as students try to log in. And of course, if you are unable, or students are unable to get logged in, they can always call the student help desk at 313-827-8400 and talk to one of our techs or one of our tech support people, and they can help them to get signed in. Okay. So that's a little bit about signing in. All right. Now let's go to the settings. And so to get to the settings, once again, I have gone to dearbornschools-org.zoom.us, and along the menu on the left-hand side, you'll notice that we have down here, the fifth item is settings. Okay, so you'll notice as we scroll through, there are many settings that are, number one, set to defaults. And you want to just leave many of those settings at their defaults, especially if you don't know what they do. All right, but I'm going to take you through a few that you might want to consider changing, or at least understand what your options are. All right, the first setting that you're going to see, and you'll notice we have a secondary menu here. So we're looking at security that matches what's in this menu on the screen right now. The first setting is the waiting room. Again, for your security, for the security of the students who are in the Zoom, and and to avoid some the catastrophes that could happen as a result, you want to make sure that your waiting room is turned on. Okay. Again, this is going to set it for all of your meetings. So unless you change it in the meeting itself or turn it off or uncheck the box, all of your meetings that you create will have a waiting room. All right. And in the waiting room, you can actually customize things. So for instance, you could, if you wanted to, my colleague Amy Gwiz has suggested that you come in here and, if you want, you can change this little message that students see when they're waiting in the waiting room to something like the bell work question. And you can ask them a question so that while they're waiting for you to let them into your Zoom, whether you're taking attendance or getting your class ready or something like that, they're going to see, excuse me, a question on the screen in the waiting room. So they know while they're waiting, that's what they do. Okay. You can also change the picture. You could add something that represents what you're going to learn today or something like that. But that's something that you would have to change before each one of the meetings if you were going to use that option. Okay. So I'm going to delete that for now so that doesn't appear. Okay. And then you'll notice as we scroll down, there are several options that are even locked by the administrators, so you don't have the option of turning them off, one of which is the passcode. And just a little note, if you give them the link, you give students the link, they don't need the password because the password is actually embedded in the link. So they should never have to put the passcode into a meeting. If they do, there may be something else going on, okay? And as we scroll down here, again, many of these are locked by our administrators for our own sake, all right, and for the sake of our students. The rest of these, we'll leave these alone, including the embed passcode and stuff like that. Now, this is the important one that I mentioned before, having an authenticated user, right? We want to make sure that students are signed in with their Dearborn Schools accounts. And this could cause some problems later on if you don't have this turned on, or if you turn it off in one of your meetings. Students can actually log in. For instance, they could change their names. They could say that they're your principal and try to get in with a separate account, and you're not going to know who they are because you didn't force them to be a Dearborn Schools account to log in. So we want to leave this on. And you'll notice here I have only Dearborn Schools accounts that's kind of highlighted here, and I've hidden the other ones, signing into Zoom and student accounts cannot host meetings. Those are hidden for me, all right? So I clicked hide in the selection to make sure that those are not available for me as I go through and create the settings. Okay. And then the rest of these, again, are set to defaults, okay? And here you can set, for instance, you can decide if students can even share their videos. So if you were sure that you never wanted students to show their videos in your meetings, you could turn this off, okay? But I'm gonna leave that on because we're in one of my meetings right now, okay? You wanna make sure that join before host is turned off. You don't want students to be entering the meeting before you get there, okay? Now, that's not that much of a problem because you have a waiting room already, but just for extra security, you can make sure that that's off. The rest of these are, again, some defaults, and they're personal meeting IDs and stuff like that. You can leave those as they are, right? I choose to mute participants upon entry. You can decide if you want upcoming meeting reminders and things like that. All right, so as we scroll through, I'm going to highlight some of the significant ones. We'll skip the encryption and talk about chat. The chat room is something that for some teachers, it has caused a lot of problems. For other teachers, they kind of like students to be able to chat. So that is personal preference and classroom management there, okay? Now, that's whole group chat. The one that I like to turn off is the private chat. And then what that's going to do is prevent students from chatting directly with each other. Okay. Now, because that is turned off, you also cannot chat privately with a student. Okay. And that's, that's a sacrifice you may want to make to avoid some of the things that go on with private chatting in a Zoom classroom. Okay. I've turned off auto saving of chats. I think that was a default. The one that I really like is the sound notification when someone joins or leaves. So I get a little, and you may be familiar with this by this point, you hear a little jingle or a little doorbell when someone joins. That helps to, in case you don't see or you're sharing your screen and you don't see the notification that someone's in the waiting room, you can turn that on, okay? And you can also set it so that only the host and co-hosts can see that, or can hear that, I should say. Okay. And then there are some other options here. Again, all of these are set to the defaults. Let's go down to screen sharing. I like to set mine by default to hosts only, and that's something that I recommend for teachers as well. You don't want students to be able to at any time share their screen because, again, you can run into problems. You don't know what they're going to share and things like that. So I like to have host only set for my meeting so that only I can share my screen. And within the meetings, you can actually change that, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so if you decide at some point during the meeting you want to have a student share what they've done or share their presentation or something like that, you can share that. Okay. The next one I want to talk about is a little bit further down, which is the whiteboard. Many teachers like to use the whiteboard to do some of their more direct instruction. And I have that obviously turned on. I'm allowing saving of the whiteboard content and things like that. But here's the catch. If you're using a Chromebook to run your Zoom meetings, you do not have the option of a whiteboard. You can only use the whiteboard if you're using a PC or a Mac. And that PC or Mac has the Zoom desktop app downloaded. Okay, so even though you might have that turned on, if you're using a Chromebook, you're not going to see that option to share a whiteboard when you share your screen later on. Okay. And then we see a few other settings, one of which is allowing participants to rename themselves. Okay. Oh, and I missed this one too. Allow removed participants to rejoin. I think this is off by default. If you at some point decide that someone is acting inappropriately and you need to deal with them from a discipline standpoint, you can remove them from your meeting. If you have this turned off, they can't get back into that particular meeting. Okay. And then you can deal with your discipline referrals and all that kind of stuff later on. All right. And know that even though you have the same link, if you set it up the way I did, once your meeting ends, they can get back into the next meeting. So because you remove them from one meeting doesn't, preclude them from joining another meeting. I'd like to turn this off as well, allowing participants to rename themselves. They can actually, just so you're aware, they can actually rename themselves before they join the meeting. But unless they know to do that, once they get into the meeting, they can't rename themselves during the meeting if you have this turned off. Okay. A couple other things going down, and notice we're in the advanced meeting settings now. You may want to enable breakout rooms. Breakout rooms are exactly what they sound like. You can break students into groups, into smaller groups, and they can interact with each other. Note of caution on that, you as the teacher can only be in one breakout room at a time. So there's the potential there of having students in video conferences that are unsupervised if you allow breakout rooms. So just be very careful with that. There are other options here like remote support that allows you to work one-on-one with a specific student, okay? And then you can enable virtual backgrounds for yourself and things like that. Okay, video filters, and a bunch of other stuff that, again, is set to defaults. And I'm going to scroll right past most of these because most of these you're not going to want to change anyway. The one that you may want to change is the request permission to unmute. If you have set students to be muted and you turn this on, then they can't unmute themselves without asking you first if they can speak, okay? So in classes where you may have difficulties with students speaking out or speaking out of turn or something like that, and you're having trouble maintaining some order, you can turn that on, okay? And then the rest of these are dealing with notifications and things like that. Again, most of these you're going to want to leave as their defaults, okay? So those are the general meeting settings that you can set before you even schedule a meeting, and some of the recommended settings that I would recommend for those, okay? Now, one last thing as we talk about meetings and some of your settings, and that is the controls within a meeting. So I want to go back to my Google slideshow again here and take a look at some of these. So what you see along the bottom are some of the controls that you have within the meeting, all right? Obviously, this one is going to control whether or not you are muted and whether or not the sound is audible to the people that are in your Zoom meeting. You can turn on and off your video. So notice that the red line through each one of these icons means that those are off. And this isn't actually the settings for this meeting because you can hear me. So I'm not actually muted at this point. But I just wanted to show you a screenshot of it. And then you see some of these other things. So let's take a look at a couple of these. You may notice next to each one of these icons off to the left here, there's a little caret, and that's going to be really important for some of your audio settings. As you see here, when I click on the caret, I get a listing of what my microphone is and what my speaker is. And obviously the microphone is what's taking the sound from you and broadcasting it to your students. The speakers is what's returning it to you, okay? And so you can use other things. You could have an external microphone. You could put earbuds in. I have AirPods that I use, and those have a really good microphone on them. And so you can use this to kind of toggle and change the settings. So if you're not hearing your students, or if they're not hearing you, or if they're reporting that your audio is breaking up and things like that, you can come into these settings and change things around a little bit and hopefully allow them to hear and to participate in the audio aspects of the meeting, okay? You can also test your own speaker and microphone. So if you want to hear what the students are hearing when they say that your voice is breaking up or something like that, you can click here on test speaker and microphone, and it will bring up those settings for you as well, okay? You'll also notice that there's a caret next to the start video, and that's where you can choose your virtual background. You can choose video filters and things like that. Kind of fun things to play around with, but also this is where if you have a document camera attached or something like that, you can toggle between cameras as well, okay? Now to go across some of the other settings down at the bottom, security, one of the settings that's in there is the one that allows other people to share their screen. So you can play around with that if you want students to share their screen. Oops. Guess I don't have a screenshot of that one. Let me go back here. Okay. You also, when you click on participants, you can see a list of participants off to the right, and you can use that to take attendance. You can use that also as a place where you can remove students or send them back to the waiting room and things like that. Okay, chat is obviously the chat room. And share screen, we'll get to, let me pass that up for now and we'll get back to that. Polling is where you can ask students questions, and you can type questions right in during the meeting and they can answer the questions right there on the screen. Record is obviously recording your meeting. You can set closed captioning to begin, and you can actually assign closed captioning to a particular student in the classroom if you wanted to. I'm not sure if I've heard of anybody doing that successfully. The next one is the breakout rooms. You can, again, choose to manually move students into those breakout rooms or have them randomly assigned. And then we've got things like reactions where you can show nonverbal feedback and things like that. Okay, so I want to focus next on the share screen option. When you click on the green share screen button, you'll notice, especially if you are working on a PC or a Mac, that you have the option again for the whiteboard. All right, that's one of the things that you can do to share your screen. Or you can just share your desktop, which is usually what I will go with if I want to just show what's on my screen. But you got to keep in mind that everything that is on your screen that's visible to you is going to be visible to your students. So you want to make sure that you don't have your bank account opened up and things like that on your screen. Okay. And you have some other options here as well. I'm using a Mac, so I can actually connect my phone or an iPad or something like that. I can show different files. I could show my calendar if I wanted to. And if you click advanced, you have some really cool tools like the ability to add another camera, or like a document camera, that is, or you can actually take a PowerPoint or a Keynote file and make that your virtual background, which is really kind of cool. So if you're up for it, play around with that. It's kind of a fun thing to do. Okay. So that's a kind of an overview of Zoom settings and how to create links and some of the recommendations that we have based on what we've seen students encounter and things like that. What I want to do next is stop the recording, and I want to take some time to respond to questions that you have. And if you'd like, you can put your questions into the chat, or you can unmute yourself and let me know what it is that you're looking to discover today. Okay, so let me stop the recording.